There was always one, only one race, and that is humanity. No matter what we are conditioned and indoctrinated to think, be, or understand, there has always been one race, and it is known globally all over the world as the human race. Each one of us has a body, soul, and spirit. Science, religion, academics approved of this fact. We are all human and have a human body and a human spirit and a human soul. Our genetics will show that all of us come from the first person who evolved on the planet. All over the world, we are stuck in a system run by a global cabal that takes humans and places them in a color category and a culture category. Centuries later, we were duped into believing in our groups, colors, sex, and gender. The first modern human that evolved on Earth was a melanated woman. So, if it's a melanated woman, there is no color. There is no black, white, red, yellow, brown races, only a melanated race. This is a fact. And this fact is we all come from a melanated woman. You can challenge your belief in egos and ideas. Yet the fact, understanding our imagination, is wonderful. But it's dangerous with all of the knowledge that we have been force-fed on a silver platter in our educational system. If we were not guided by false narratives and beliefs and a system that keeps our child's mind away from the spiritual being from 5 years till adulthood, if we were allowed to walk in our spirit from the time we are birthed into this world, before the color wars, before the system was created and implemented around the world. This system is categorized as education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, religion, politics, sex, and war. Before the system, all life was imperfection, and the species that evolved and walked on two legs was a human. The first to evolve was a female, created in the Maker's image. I call this first creator Cosmic Mother, for I know not her name, but she brings all into existence. Science knows that the melanated woman has all the DNA to create all humans. For example, if you know someone that is melanated or have a melanated skin tone, a dark skin tone, when they breed or create a child, the mother will give birth to the child. And if she has more than one child, each child's skin tone becomes lighter, and so on down the line. So when you ponder this fact historically, many centuries past, you will find human children and adults of all shades, skin tones, and no new cultures, no new races, just one large family. Go on and do the research. If you can set your ego conditioning and indoctrination to the side, you could use your discernment. Instead of watching these with these spiritual eyes, focus with these regular eyes. Focus on these spiritual eyes. Excuse me, because we work on the five senses, but there are more senses than five. We work on 7 chakras, but there are more chakras than 7. But none of us really divert from the knowledge that we are given on that silver platter. So I don't want to get distracted. I want to get back to this. So go on and do the research. As a mother always did, a mother always loves their children before the distress of war began. The silent and blatant war on women and children historically, this has been silenced and omitted from historical books. The human melanated woman and child were never known as color coordinated. That came after the Dark Ages. I grew up in a world learning about the colorized epidemic, which is labeled humanity. But when I was going through school, Generation X, we never really had a problem with the color of skin. We just had a problem with respect, kindness. If you didn't have it, you didn't show it, we didn't want to do anything with you. And we would treat you as we wanted to be treated. That's the way we were taught. So if you take it back to the 15th century or the 18th century, colonization displaced all of these children into foundling homes. These were created for newborn infants until children of age infancy to 18. All are under the age to go to war. So they are put in these foundling homes or they're orphanages or religious institutions or hospitals. These younger children will be raised in work camps or shipped around the world. And hospitals and religious institutions would take part in that child slavery worldwide of humans. Color never mattered until the 1900s. History recalls accounts of abortion that took place in the 1900s, and this was a new age where the color factor started to take precedence. And in the United States and European countries, 60% of the children were labeled as a color. And at that time it was white. Yet each of them possessed melanin in their blood and DNA. But in the Americas where I was born and raised, they focus on these colors: white, red, black, brown, yellow. And when I took apart and I went to the other side of the ocean, I saw that they don't focus on the color so much, and they also don't focus on the melanization, but there really isn't that stigma of racism, even though you see it, lingering, but there were no KKKs over in Europe, or the stories of it. And there were here in the United States, but I didn't see it in 52 states that I traveled. I just heard stories and assumed it. So let's go back to, let's say, the history of my great-grandparents, or anyone whose great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents were dumped on Ellis Island. During this child scandal of child labor, many of the mines underground and many others dug out that remainders of buildings and churches that were buried during this mud flood that Europe documents. And biblical times, they documented Noah and the flood. But there is an account of something burying the world. Whether it's religion, whether it's the mud flood, there is something. We do have to research it, but whether it is one or the other, something's been done. So let's talk about these children. Their stories tell, or my generation tell, of their grandparents and their great-grandparents actually coming here with no parents and no family. They arrived on ships and then were sent throughout the United States on train and sent all over around the world as well. And many of these went to North America. Now, the ones that went to North America, destination Ellis Island, they were targeted to transfer some children to work on, and some of the work camps, some of the mines. So the first wave of children that became adults after those years, 13, 14, 15, that's that idea of Romeo and Juliet, they started having children. And those children were being raised with the same knowledge or the same history that they were being taught. Now, none of them came here with grandparents, none of them came here with great-grandparents, none of them came here with parents. So they didn't come here with a history. They were given a history. So I believe that here in the United States, they were force-fed a history that Europe didn't have, because when I went to Europe and traveled around those 68 countries, no one had the same accounts as what I had. And talking about Columbus, that was a big thing here. They didn't really have too much accounts to it, but they had other stories about him. So if you're able to get out of your comfort zone and travel the world, maybe you're able to discern more or create a better perception here with these three eyes, pyramid, these three eyes, so you can understand where you come from, what the story is. And as I mentioned, in my youth, my classmates would speak of their elders. And my heart and gut feelings felt their struggle as a little child, as a teenager. The ones that came here all alone with no parents, that's got to be hard. This reminded me of the Little Rascals I grew up with watching on TV. When I became older, It all began to make sense to me as I traveled throughout Europe and discovered the foundling homes in Russia, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, all over Europe. Why and what provoked this massive child transport of child slavery labor? I had to search it out, but it was very difficult to find information. Who could leave a child or infant to fend on their own? I can't grasp that concept because my generation grew up with, most of them grew up with two parents in the house. But my mother's generation also had, mainly, mostly people with two parents in the house. Uh, the generations before didn't have any. They were being displaced, sent away. Some of them had to just move away to find work. It was difficult in the world. So when I came across those foundling homes, it made me want to research more because I couldn't understand why they would leave these children on their own or dump them inside a little circle or a little opening inside the church or inside an orphanage home saying, I can't take care of this baby. Then I stumbled on these rules of engagement. Anyone birthing a child out of wedlock back then or rape and couldn't care for the baby, they had to give it up. Also, integration had begun in my mother's time. And growing up there was a displacement in families because I guess here in the United States, it was just coming off the idea of slavery, people being free. But there was something going on during that time of slavery, because all these kids are being sold off, all these people are being sold off. And I couldn't understand the displacement, but it was on 7 continents when I did the research. The global system began for me from when I do the research in 1776. 1776 sparks great events here in Americas, but on 7 continents also. There was a conditioning, indoctrination, there was war, economic, education, entertainment, labor, law, religion, politics, sex played a crucial part. And that became the system. This came after the undocumented wars on the darker melanated people. They called the Dark Ages. And in Europe, there is a account of those wars. I've come across this embroidery that had to be about 100 feet long and maybe about 18 to 20 feet high, but it was long. And in there was an embroidered picture of these castles and these darker melanated people in these castles being attacked by a lighter melanated race, But in Europe, the idea of that embroidery had a lot of red hair. And I'm not speculating or anything on the red hair, because when I grew up with the redhead, they were always portrayed on TV as the oracles, the kings, the queens, the magic makers, the illuminators, the witches. They were something special. So I knew that, in my research too, when I came across the red hair, that is an equivalent of a dark melanated person. You can see that the red hair gets absorbed throughout the years and it becomes a lighter color. And this person still looks healthy, They don't get more paler. Their hair gets more lighter. And sometimes you'll see a little bit of freckles on there. But that melanation is in the body. So with this, let's get back to that system. That system that came after the undocumented wars of the Dark Ages and worked its way into the golden era or the golden years, I believe that's called back then. So it's creating a world that forced a conditioning and indoctrination of the melanated white majority. As a teenager searching for why the group of melanated whites in Europe and America were aborting these children made no sense until I saw the color factor, where they were just trying to eliminate the fact that, or eliminate the idea of us understanding who we are. because the melanation is inside of everyone. And I do remember this one statement when I was little. The All right, let's go back to the color for a minute. The white ladies would always say they portrayed or they liked a tall, dark, and handsome. So I would never see a white male with dark features or dark hair. Mostly it was blonde hair or red hair or brown hair. Some with black hair, but then they were also cut into this either Hispanic or Spanish. So that's why it throws me off. If we could use the word melanated, it's probably easier to understand all of this. But me being from Generation X, I had to dig in the crevices so I could find out these pieces of the puzzle. Why this was spoken out on TV, tall, dark, and handsome, was the dream man. So I was puzzled. But at times bells and whistles would just go off. And this energy inside my discernment process, would navigate me away from the history, because the history did have some accounts in the past and in the present of men leaving children behind. That seems to be something that is worldwide, decade long, centuries long. I haven't heard a story where there has been men not abandoning their children. And in my generation, I've seen that women had to struggle taking care of their children. So I really have to I won't say the blame, but I have to direct it more towards men, because there had to be something that they could have done, or something they could have sacrificed instead of, women either, or men and women putting their children in adoption or abortion, because abortion is a harsh thing to do. That stays permanent. So when I became older, I realized that a vasectomy is something that I heard from my aunt, and I had to ask what that was, and she explained it to me. Because my uncle had one, because they had too many children. Also, back then, birth control pills had not existed yet. So how easy would it have been to save all the children in the world if someone had a vasectomy in place of abortion? How many sacrifices would it never been necessary to do with these children if all the male in the world that contributes to an unwanted pregnancy would immediately do a vasectomy? I think that would have bettered the world. If they submitted, or maybe even been forced to undergo a voluntary vasectomy, I think that would have helped the world more, especially psychologically for the women. Because if any man, for instance, has to contribute to another unwanted pregnancy, and it has to be the woman's responsibility to get rid of this child, I think the man should suffer also a horrible fate. Because you're killing off an embryo, you're killing off future life, you're killing off an ancestor, you're killing off some beautiful being. And I say this because vasectomy is a short process, and it is reversible. Motherhood is not reversible, nor is abortion. Once you're a mother, you are a mother as long as you live. Even if you choose to give that child up for adoption, the moment you hear that child crying it, whether it's during the day, during the night, that mother will wonder how he or she, the child, is getting along. So for the men out there, I know this seems a little unorthodox and a little harsh to hear, but men have centuries, decades of history of neglecting and abandoning the mother and the child. So a vasectomy that's reversible, I think that's worth it. So if you want to go out there and have fun as a man in your youth, and you don't want to have any responsibility, that sounds like a perfect solution. That is a logical conclusion when men want to go out and contribute to the unwanted pregnancy. And when the time comes that you find someone that you want to create with, sure, you can reverse the process. So, understanding that, as a Generation X in my teen years, I had to ask myself, how do we get here? And the more research I do, I find out that the global system, which was created, the so-called people governing all countries, they were the ones that, changed all of this with their systems. So how does this generation right now change the way we look at ourselves and where we go in the future? Many of us have lived our lives every single day, living lies and denial. Um, yeah, it's sad, but we live our lives in denial. And I'm not talking about denial in Egypt, real denial, about the fact that we all are indoctrinated and conditioned to be deeply racist in a color, or a colorist in our color. Teachers, for instance, are the ones that dispense facts and figures so they can get their students ready for the end of the year tests and exams. A trainer trains animals, athletes in the military. I was once a coach and a trainer. But I believe that we all need to become educators. And to understand educator, the word educator comes from the root word educo, is duco, educator. The plural educatori, the feminine equivalent educatora, which means bring up, rear, educate, produce, to lead. And if you break it down, the E means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, the suffix or, which means the ones who do. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. We spend so much money on the education system, yet there are not that many people that are led out of their ignorance, which shows that this is an indoctrination system. We are all members of the human family and or the human species, which started, as I said, with a melanated woman about 300,000 years ago. So I want you to hear this well, because I know you won't like it. But all cultures, all colors are just, if they're colors, they're just faded black. You understand? So every one of you, if you trace your DNA way back, far enough, you're going to find that some of your DNA comes from Africa. I believe Africa's Alkebulan back in the day. That was the name of it before the colonizers gave it that name. So because we all have the same ancestral back then, every single one of us, and those who you think that, or you think do not have your same lineage, they are obviously just, a little bit misguided, Maybe they're misguided, maybe they're drunk, maybe they're high, maybe they're stoned. But the same ancestry means that each one of us, dark melanated to light melanated, each one of us is 30th to 50th cousin to every person in the world. Everyone that thinks they are biracial or of another color, just stop thinking, throw that out the window. Because we have to get rid of this language of racism and walk in the language of true spirit. Now, as I said, I'm not a teacher, but I have been called to trainer of sports. I have, however, become an educator who traveled the world, served in the military, and played professional sports. But I never lived inside of the boxer system. I also had teachers that taught us how to think outside that box. And thank you, teachers, especially my 6th grade teacher. She was one of those that made sure we were thinkers. Bless her. Miss Zaz, love you. And due to the discernment, we all had, at 2 years old, I believe that we perfected that discernment. Because you could realize that, if your parents are saying no or yes and giving you a reason, you'd sit there, nah. I mean, you couldn't verbally say it, or maybe you didn't have the words, and you definitely didn't have the schooling to think and reason, but you knew they were full of crap, because you were like, nah, you did it yesterday, that's how you do it, so I'm going to quietly go do it. All you kids, every person, we perfected that discernment at a young age. And by 5 years old, you couldn't stop us. We would hold our ground against you. That's why our parents quickly allowed that indoctrination into the schools. They were trying to get us to live inside that box, even though as a child you live outside that box. You acted as the one that does, and then you go into school and yeah, you're derailed from your own spirit or walking in your own essence. Those first 5 years are crucial, because you're powerful, and if you're able to stay with that discernment, whew, you definitely be a free thinker. It wouldn't take you as long as most of my generation, to wake up. There's a lot of them that are still sleeping, but there were a lot that were awake. But I like to categorize the people as an animal. You have parrots, sheep, pigs, and wolves. You have the parrot. I'll parrotize anything that comes off TV. Hey, the doctor said eat feces and it'll cure cancer. And then you have the pigs that just don't give a crap at all. They don't care about anything. Now you have the sheep. You know exactly what that is. That's the United States of America. America. Do you understand? And then you have the wolves that are in between. All of those parrots, sheep, and pigs. But since they're walking on all fours, you can't see anything. Maybe those parrots can see those wolves, but they'll start just attacking them with the parrotization. And that's something that's kind of scary. The way we get indoctrinated into the system, the way we start believing with that ego. Because as a child, you're sitting there as a spiritual being. And then at 5, you start getting indoctrinated. And when you're in school, you'll start building up this ego. And during maybe your 2nd, 3rd year, you'll have more doubts than you've ever had, or about yourself, that you start becoming human. You're not that spirit anymore. Now you're walking in human. And once they get you to walk in that human, now you finish your 12 years or 13 years of education, maybe even 16 to 18 years, 20 years, depending on if you're going for your PhD and doctorates. But you're going to be stuck there for a long time inside this box. And you're only going to regurgitate whatever comes natural from whatever you learn in that process. Now you just remember that if you want to sit there and come up with a good idea, or even a fresh idea, it's never going to really truly come, because you're going to go think inside this brain, which had all this education from way back when. Now you have all this closet space of education. You're going to pick some of this old knowledge and say it's a new idea. Hence, no new ideas. So, let's talk about us, the human being, the spiritual molecule. You learn who you are by unlearning who they taught you to be. But it is difficult, And we're a country and culture that has so much hate. And don't get me wrong, there is love out there, but hate has no relationship with love. But love has a relationship with hate. Figure that out. So there are stories from the past, centuries before. There are histories that come to be written of our being. It was holy, it was spiritual, it was pure. Then one day, there was this story about one of these pure, holy beings having a temper tantrum. So this temper tantrum was defined as a evil way and a power of overpowering the spiritual senses. And we overpower it with the physical senses. Once we're spiritual, we get upset, we throw a tantrum. Now it's overpowered by our physical senses. And the physical senses are joy, happiness, confidence, and peace, for instance. The powerful temper that this holy being had could not bring this being back into peace, back into the perfection that this being had. So this being no longer could make these joyous happiness, peaceful feelings permanent again within the body. So in traditions of, the past oral traditions of histories that were eliminated, for instance, the Native American, they call it, you can't use the word Indian, because of all these rules. I'm Generation X, we grew up with Sticks and stones break our bones. Names will never hurt us. So screw anybody that really can't understand what I'm saying right now. I'm going to be using words that my generation used and used against me. So here we are back to that being, that holy being that had this powerful temper tantrum. All right, that he's labeled as the devil or Satan, but I really don't believe that really exists unless you give it power with your thoughts, with your verbiage. That's the power of mind and thought that goes out there that creates so many things that manifest in the universe. So there could be a godlike being, but we're the ones that created a negative, satanic, or evil being because of how we words that we use and we utter out and how we think and we project that out. So as I said, this being couldn't bring back these peaceful confidence, joy, happiness back into his system. And there we go. We'll go back to, that's what I was back on track in my mind. Sorry about that. I'm getting older. You had the oral traditions of Africans. You had the oral traditions of the people in the Americas, the South Americas, the North Americas, and North America goes all the way up to Canada. So these people had a lot of different subjects and information to combat or relieve anyone from any type of suffering. Negative suffering, depression, you name it. So, but later on, this information was taken from the people. And they took it away from the people in this colonization to pave a way for a culture that we are in today. Because nature always finds a way to restore itself. You can see that. I've spoken to a lot of people. If you go back in time to the Inquisition and all these wars in Europe, you can see that a lot of this was like a war on women. Even though men were fighting it, it was a war on women and children. Whoever it was that was in tune with the spirit, anyone that was in tune with something we don't believe in, something that lived in the darkness, the unknown. But I'm going to call it spirit just for argument's sake, because most of you don't even use spirit or even understand spirit or define spirit. Religion is something that today's society is into, and religion defines spirit as something totally else, as a different being. It doesn't define it as you, the spirit, and you have a flesh, your body, you're encased in this body. I don't know if you want to call it your own jail cell, but you are something special. My generation got that idea of superheroes, comics, X-Men. We are those X-Men when we walk in spirit, and our mind and our verbiage are together working in that spirit. And you, Generation X, are also the witnesses of history's accounts of Africans and natives all around the world, native, on all 7 continents, that were not allowed to speak their language, teach their oral traditions, speak or think and project their spirit onto things. Otherwise they would be killed, pillaged, raped, dismembered, taken away. We know that it's in our history books, and most cultures don't have that, but we do. We're that last of the line to really read in between those lines and navigate through. You can wake yourself up, even faster if you're more honest in your respect for yourself, or understanding that spirit within yourself. I'm proud to sense this, as I once did before, and now generations younger than me are restoring the spiritual truth. I have other people from different countries getting in touch with me, and I get in touch with them, and they're understanding more of the oral traditions because they're from the countries of the oral traditions, and they have bloodline of these people from the oral tradition. So now they're teaching that back onto me, which is more waking my spirit even more, And these younger teachers they're holding high positions, in spirituality, peace, love, and light to all of them. And I pray for blessings to be abundant and plentiful for everybody. You have to understand, there has to be a special setting that where we can share this information. I try to share it on YouTube, X off of YouTube. So that's why most times you'll find me on BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble. Uh, yeah, just because they don't sit there and try to eliminate these, but it's very hard to find someone that's doing this type of information because they don't market it, like YouTube does. Hey, you type in spiritual, you type in heart, wherever it goes, you're going to get these videos. But you're not going to get too many videos from me, and it's not even a human being that's canceling me out of YouTube. It's this automated intelligence. You like to call it artificial intelligence, but a rubber doll is artificial, and if it has a robot or some kind of technology, that makes it automated. So you got to understand, we are the first automated technology, the automated individuals. We're spirit. Our spirit does that. And my generation, I've come into contact with a lot of them that said, hey, you're right. And you can see that, in everything, like the sky above is mapped up as above as below on the ground. And even under the ground is mapped below. And in us is mapped below. And the tree of life, you can see it in your lungs. You can see it in your brain. You can see it everywhere around in nature, So I don't want to get sidetracked. Sometimes go on a rant. So let's talk about this being again. So, we have the story of God and the devil. God created a species, and the next thing you know, someone didn't like it. They became temper tantrum, aggressive, and then they were casted out of the place where eternal light and abundance was. And they call this evil. So a power of influence, is like the kind that they encourage us to have in this now time. But I believe people need to know about these things, and about one of these subjects is one of the holy people we were told about. He was a holy being back in the first world, just like of the holy people in the native aspects. There had to be people in charge back then, even way back then, and there were selected people or beings that were referred to as those people as holy people. Later on they were referred to as shaman, medicine men, but first they were holy people. And there was one amongst their people, in those first world. And around the third world is, I think, or the second world is when that temper tantrum took place, so that's when the frequencies started to change. I know this might not make sense, but you got to go ahead and do the research, because I'm just pulling in everything that I've learned and just trying to give it to you, on this video, on a couple of videos. Maybe I'll have to make a couple. I don't know when the camera is going to turn off, and I don't know, when I'll have to reset it. And so you've got to be smart enough to go in, and whatever you hear, if it hits on you, resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, and you want to only hop on in the comments and negate, back off, go do some research, and then figure out what it is. And you tell me what it is, because I'm not sitting here trying to debate you. And you're not going to sit here and debate me. You'll be considered blocked. Yeah, because we're a human species. If you're not trying to figure out the solution, you're not a piece of the puzzle. And all of us are a piece of the puzzle. So here we are. We're back to the holy people. Like I said, they were considered the holy people, and they wanted to do certain things. And other holy people didn't agree with this one person that had the temper tantrum. And some people wouldn't consent to give this individual energy or power, and didn't want to help change what they wanted to do. So the story is told about one being, and he became known as a negative force, that contradiction of spirit. Because he was getting this other holy people to agree with him, he got a group to agree with him, he thought that that temper tantrum, would set the world on fire. But setting fire to the second world is when that problem probably occurred. I call it the second world or third world, but you got to research it so this way you could find out if it's this world. I'm not here to get any negations, So, like I said, some stories say that there's a fire that actually happened in the first world, second world, and it is when that problem occurred, and that's from the native. And there aren't too many natives that you could find around. So some stories say that this fire actually happened, and in the third world, we had children that were born and learning since their youth the old ways, and those younger generations that I'm talking about. They were learning the old ways and never been so the old ways never really been forgotten. So you have to have some type of initiation into these ceremonies, but in Americas we don't have these. In Europe they don't have these. It's usually in the Africas or deeper in the Americas. Being a military man and going through missions, I've heard, I could speak about a mission where, they grabbed a group of people and disposed of them because they had the last connections and the last verbiage of helping this world. They were probably the next shaman, but once they were killed off, the last shaman on their continent was killed off, and right after that, they were attacking all their forests, all their tropical forests, and killing off the nature because there was no one left to attack and cure the physical world through the spiritual world. So when we become disagreeable person and we do things on contrary to the ways of the holy people of the past, for us to experience existence that goes against the very teaching of the holy people or the idea of your religions, but you have to pump away religion for a moment, and really think about spirituality. Read through the lines of all those books that they give you, because you're able to use your discernment and your spirit to really get the answers of your Akashic records deep down into your DNA. It's possible, but you can't stray away from it. It's difficult, because a lot of people lack spirit. So back then, these natives had these ceremonies, that would get them into the direction of seeing visions, hearing visions, becoming the visions. So, I don't know, to try to make a better understanding for you. Contrary to the ways of the past, there was a way to experience existence that goes against the very teachings that we have today. And if you avoid that and stray away from the old ways, you're susceptible to these new ways, and I don't want to lose my thought, but I want to try to explain this to you in the best, easiest way that I don't get too technical. That's what I was doing this whole time, because I don't want you to think that you're going to have go and perform these ceremonies, because a lot of you don't even understand these ceremonies. A lot of you don't even understand these ways. But you know that there is something out there that's not right about this world, especially if you're my generation or older. You already know that my generation, my grandmothers used to call the doctors quacks, psychologists, hypocrites, the government, unnecessary and evil. And our great-grandparents our parents had account of our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents just treating one another with love and kindness and bartering. Hey, you could do that, I could do this, done. Money wasn't really big back then. It was gold and silver was a commodity, but paper money, that fake money that's outside here, monopoly money, that doesn't do anything. It gives you the idea, but it states it on the money. what it is. Promissory note. I promise you this. Well, they promised us a lot of things in our generation. Our governments promised us, our educators promised us, or, the system promised us. And we saw it not to be true. We saw a beautiful world get destroyed. I was a generation that grew up with the idea coming into play of processed foods, plastics, Tupperware, medicine, because if you ran and you bumped your head, your parents would be like, hey, just rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. And it was true. You rub some dirt on it and nature would take its course. It wouldn't get infected. You rub some dirt on it, stop the bleeding, and go home, wash it. If you bumped your head, you had a lump. But other than that, you washed it, put a Band-Aid, sometimes put an antiseptic, castor oil, cod liver oil, lemon, orange, some type of fruit, vegetable. That helped. Later on, you would put a steak on it, but that wasn't a natural. Well, it wasn't natural from a beast or animal, but it wasn't something natural to do unless it was a black eye, only because of the coldness that it was in that refrigerator or that freezer. So you could use anything that was cold in that freezer. Ice, plastic, crap that they gave us you could have froze and just put on your eye. You could have put a wet towel, let it freeze, and then put it on your eye. Once it melts, put it back in. So there's a lot of ways my generation combated so much of the ailments and diseases to the body. Look at our generation, our parents and our great-grandparents. Some of them are still alive. Not mine, but, well, my parents are still alive, but, my mother, but my grandparents aren't. I have friends that still have their parents and grandparents, which is great, because I could sit there and pick their minds and ask them a question, they'll go ask, and then you'll hear the stories about the great-grandparents is not, watching this system come into play, watching the governments come into view, because it was just a whole bunch of wealthy people that were creating certain things. And when the baby boomers came out, that's when they started getting really afraid. But there was always a fear of the population growing. There is a large population, but if you take all the populations around the world and you condense them all into Australia, for instance, and give everybody about 2 acres to 5 acres, you still have room left over in Australia, and then the rest of the world will be unpopulated. So don't believe in that scarcity. It's all nonsense. So let's go back to this holy person. I know I'm getting sidetracked. I do that a lot. So this evil person, that was kind of pushed in our face in the 80s, rock with the idea of the devil, and back then, there was also this idea of people of the same sex, Now I have no problem with what you'd like to do, it's your preference, but that's also a video for another day. Let's stay back on this. So there was this holy person that was dark inside their heart, black inside their heart, and they couldn't get all people to agree with him. So he set fire, to the whole world, and that was there to make plans to abandon the second world, and in this third world, the fire is still raging. We have these conditions, that are all over the world, and symptoms all over the world that weren't there in my generation, weren't there in my mother's generation, weren't there in my great-grandparents' generation. Like, for instance, today, the same-sex thing, that makes no sense to me, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, because back in the Roaring '20s, they used to call it the gay '20s, and there's history about same-sex. And then if you look at the founding fathers in America, All of them came here with high heels, lipsticks, wigs, stockings, and they called themselves British. And then if you go back, you got the Romans with the skirts and the kilts, and the Irish with the kilts, and the Scottish with the kilts, and the Egyptians with the kilts and the dresses, and every time they come back from war, eyeliner and a little rouge, makeup. Maybe it's a little blood or makeup. So it's been there. That's been there. I think hetero has been here for a short time. Was introduced, but it seems to work out. Hetero, for some reason, you can create children. But like I said, that's a video for another day. So we're back, and we're trying to touch on what we are. That spiritual molecule inside. And that spiritual molecule that I'm trying to explain is a story in Haiti where it's Napoleon. Napoleon goes out to Haiti. He was sent there, I believe, with the French and Spaniards. Had an idea of working together, going over to Haiti and enslaving the population. And they couldn't, because the last of Haiti had this verbiage and this oral tradition that they were treating everybody, that they could work in unison with the energies, with nature, with the universe. So they were able to shapeshift. They were able to use earth, water, all the elements in their favor. They were able to get into the minds of these people and send them away without fighting. They were able to do it. And when Napoleon lost, he went back, reported to the Queen that he's fighting a spiritual molecule. So they eliminated all soldiers and all ideas of coming in to trying to kill him, and they sent over the scientists. And the scientists came out and figured, trying to figure out what they were. That's why science is so big now today. And science is trying to create, as above as below, the reciprocal from spiritual to technical, to all these advances. So, but they eliminate us out of the equation. They eliminate the idea of God out of the equation, or the creator, or whatever it is. They eliminate that, and then they create their hypothesis and synthesize their ideas. Do the research. Einstein says knowledge is your imagination is more important than knowledge. So you can see that there's something to navigate in between those words, because your imagination works with your thoughts, your words, your verbiage, your spirit. And we've had that since a little child. So as an adult, we kind of lose that imagination, and lose that discernment. And it's sad, because we get lost with those five senses, and we think that those five senses are going to lead us back into where we need to be. But it doesn't, unless you're going to step away from this entire system and step away from all the knowledge that you have, put it in a suitcase, put it inside a closet. Don't refer to it. Just go out and find your own information, get to know people. You'll see that your perception will change. Even the things I'm telling you now in this video, your perception is kind of going to change once you explore. If you're going to sit there and just, I'm going to battle it, then I know you're too weak to understand what I'm saying. You shouldn't even be here. You should have stopped the video a long time ago. But I just wanted to get you the idea, to understand that we are a spiritual essence. We are so beautifully powerful. Things come to you in your dreams. The natives had this idea of the dream time. The Africans, they also say that you get your information through the dream time, because your ancestors worked and messaged you towards those, and you just got to be prepared to listen to those. And that's kind of similar to the natives around all the worlds and all the cultures, all the continents. So if you research the older tribes. Don't worry about the history that you have now, the Indo-European, because my generation, like you said, we heard about the Asians, but we didn't hear too much about Europe. But we heard and learned in school Asia, Asia Peninsula, Asia, Asia Minor, Asia, Eurasia, Asia, Europe. So it looks like Asia sponsored Europe, you know. And then Europe, when they got sponsored, there was a group that decided to take over that, you know, and then you call them, what do we call them there? The Rothschilds, the elite, you know, all those that you have your ideas. You'll see where it's coming from because we focus on World War One, we focus on World War Two, we focus on Vietnam, but we don't go backwards to the Caucasus War. The Caucasus War, which is Asia coming fighting, Europe coming fighting. Asia coming fight, Europe coming fight. Then a cooperation, and then the World War One and World War Two, which is European World War, European World War Two, because it wasn't World War. America weren't fighting in World War Two, really. You know, there were people in Europe that came over. You know, and the Caucasus War was that cooperation on going over towards the new world and creating a new population and a new idea of the world and a new history for the world, because there were too many here with hundreds of years and thousands of years of experience on the other side of the ocean, other side of the Atlantic, European side, Asia, Africa, Australia, and the left side of the Americas, you know. And when you see how small the world is on the map, the left side of the Americas and that Asia is also right over here, you know. So you can see that European came in to take out the Indians, and the Asians came in South America to take over that part. So throughout those years, the Caucasus War created a different type of system, different type of history. It took the melanated person, which all of us are, and confused them, you know, confused them into believing in their own truth, understanding their own truth, and fighting a different battle, a me-you battle, your color, your religion, your culture. And you see that's real big too, you know. Nowadays, we're in 2023 now. I'm in Long Island, New York, and I see everybody coming over from Asia and South America and different places. And if you look at the people promoting their culture through their flags in their car, it's unreal, you know, that everyone that's coming from a third world is coming into America, which used to be a first world, which is now a third world. And it has been for the last 20, 30 years because of the mentalities or the dumbed down of this nation, you know, or the killing of the spirituality of the individual to discern for themselves the truth. You know, like for instance, COVID and these vaccines. My generation knew, watching Dustin Hoffman on TV of Outbreak. Oh my God, if there's a virus, it takes so many years before you could find a antidote. And you have to find the right monkey to fix this antidote. So we already knew that COVID was not real, not true, man-made, whatever it was. And people like me that went over to or were in the military during Gulf War. Gulf War was the nuclear, biological, chemical warfare, which none of us experienced, but all of us got vaccinated with. And that was 1991. 2021 was COVID. So talking so many years later, the same symptoms of these people that turn around having convulsions are the same thing that happened with the Desert Storm victims that had Gulf War syndrome. You can go ahead and research it. It's out there for you to research. I'm just giving you nice golden nuggets from this conversation because I need to really share with the world, this idea of what this BS that's going on. I've sat down with my own groups and a little bit older, and they're like, "Holy shit, you're freaking right. I don't want to be right." I just knew that I was the only one in this world that was not a professional actor, was not a professional. Well, I was a professional sports player in a couple of places, but not on every continent. But I was able to go to 68 countries and 52 states, and you haven't. Some of you didn't even get out of your box. Some of you do go to the Caribbean, and the Caribbean islands. Some do go to Europe, but you don't stay there for 6 months. You don't get to know the culture. You don't get to know the people. I got to know people playing baseball, playing professional baseball in so many countries. And most of those people are struggling getting money, coming from mountains and terrains and bushes to play baseball. And I came from the States to play baseball. I got paid way better than they did, only because, they were trying to build up baseball there. If I was a soccer player, I would have went to the States, but it wasn't big here in the States, so I stuck with the baseball. I was lucky enough to play in 68 countries in those 27 years. And in the 30 years that I've been roaming around, I've got to see a lot of things where I didn't have to go to school to be educated. These are all things that I've learned from other people, natives, locals, regular people. And I was able to shake hands, hug, break bread with over 1 million people. You understand? Over 1 million people. Have you done that? Have you been able to do that? Some reason I was able to do that. And it put me on this path so that we could all sit here and one day come together on this table and figure out what's wrong with this world. You've got to step into your spirit, understand things with your discernment. That's probably the spirits, all those clocks and bells in this house that are going off, because they know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe those are the messages that you can understand. If we go back this video, rewind this video, every time I start talking and those clocks go off in the background, you can see at those times, oh man, he hit on a subject that, the clock's going off on that subject again. It's hitting it on this again. If I go and watch this video again, I'll understand exactly what they're trying to say to me. So I need you to get up, smell a coffee, taste it, with all the senses that you have, Understand that you are so beautiful, so special. Understand that you and I really have to come together, like I did with all these other people. Sit at the table, redefine this world, observe and see what really does protect us and how we can protect us, There is one being, and that's us, a spiritual being. Every single one of us encased in the flesh. So I'm going to get back to you on part 2 of this video, because I want to speak about how the soul, the spirit, the energy comes into this body. I know this was a lot of information for you to digest, but we'll take it for now. I think it's been an hour or something like that, so I don't want to bore you too much. I'll post this one, and I'll see you on the next video. Have a good night. Love you guys. And I've heard this word. There was a Max Egan that introduced this word to me, and then I started researching. It's called In Lakesh. I am another yourself. You have a good night. Love you guys.